As a leader of a big organization, living and dying on Slack or Teams or other chat based platforms to get the work done is oftentimes full of pitfalls. But for an expat executive living and working in a culture that's extremely different from their own, it is full of traps. And we're going to talk about that today. I think one of the things that really hindered my ability to get moving in the right direction the first years of my 11-year time there was the fact that I felt like I was a really good communicator, and I felt like I was really getting points across in a way that people would understand them, and the reality was I was not, especially moving into a place where English is the second or even third language where people were struggling every day just to get the basic nuance of what I was trying to say. And the pressure that I felt moving over there was that I was put there for a reason, right? I was put there to do big things. And so I needed to have big words, and I needed to have a lot of them. And I used them quite effectively in my mind. But that was hindering my progress with my teams. And this is only amplified exponentially when you're using such as Slack or Teams or other different platforms. So in my experience, and also the experience of our 30-member Expat Advisory Board, there are really kind of distills down to three main reasons why people fail in overseas assignments working on platforms such as Teams and Slack. The first one is nuance. There's just so much embedded meaning in the words of people who are speaking to you, A, from a different business culture, B, through a language gap that English could be a second or third language to them. Nuance is lost on Slack and Teams, especially with Westerners. One of the biggest complaints I had when I first went overseas, and this was before we were using text-based platforms a lot, was that my emails were so direct that people thought I was angry all the time, literally thought I was angry all the time, when I thought I was just saving people time by getting directly to the point and saying this is what I need. But I came across as someone who didn't really care about the other individual, and in this particular culture, it was a big deal. So nuance and the layers of nuance that are on our messaging sometimes get lost on these platforms. The second thing, and this was really brought to light by our discussions with the Expat Advisory Board, is that you're battling preconceived notions. And so your words really matter, and you have to choose them very carefully. What do I mean by battling preconceived notions? There's a really big perception that when an expat is sent overseas, that they're only going to be there for a very short period of time, that they're there to kind of shake things up and then move on. And so a lot of times the people that you're dealing with feel like that there's an artificial layer of something there that keeps you from becoming closer colleagues, becoming better workmates. And oftentimes there's a notion there that you are only going to be there for a short period of time. And this gets highlighted when Westerners use Slack and Teams because we don't typically employ the friendliness that we do in other forms of communication. So that's the second thing that I would say is always keep it in mind that they don't know you. The folks you're working with don't know you as well. They are having probably a hard time distinguishing your business culture from their own, and the conversations you have are really hyper important in trying to get across points. The third thing is the understanding that in expat situations where you are sent to work with a team from a business culture that's different than your own, is that there is deep understanding that comes from face-to-face interactions. When you are working abroad, people are studying your face 24 hours a day, especially if you're the boss. They're looking at you to try to see if they can predict what you're going to say, if they can understand exactly what you're trying to say, what is the message behind the message. And this understanding typically only comes from face-to-face interactions. So if you're using Slack, if you're working from home quite a bit and you're using Slack or Teams, this gets lost in the translation. So the perception that comes across is that there's just a lack of care and that you don't have that desire to have a deep relationship with the folks around you. So that's it. Three things. Nuance. Americans, Westerners, we want to get the job done. There's an aspect of that in all of our communications, which makes our communications short. And we think that that's a good thing, but in a lot of cultures, that is not seen as a good thing. Secondly, you're battling, whether you know it or not, you're battling preconceived notions. Your words matter. They absolutely matter. And choosing them carefully instead of just dishing them off into the ether really fast is a huge issue. And finally, understanding comes from face-to-face interactions. If you're working from home and you're having a difficult time doing these face-to-face interactions, I would really implore you to figure out ways to get in front of your teams, sit with them, talk to them, get to know them, understand their situation. And finally, get help from someone who's been there before. And our teams that coach expat executives have been there. We've also studied up on the intercultural proclivities of different areas versus different areas. We understand the horizons of intercultural differences. Get help so that we can point out the gaps that exist so that you don't make the mistakes that I made and so many others made. Contact us at cranberryleadership.com or reach out to me, Tom at cranberryleadership.com. Happy to help.